When I began my channel way back in 2016, I wanted to make videos about my love for Sega and its Saturn console. There were plenty of people making gaming related content already, but few were doing opinion pieces that put Sega in a positive light. Even when someone did like some of Sega's games, it almost always came with a disclaimer of some kind that Nintendo was better. I wanted to put a voice out there that said otherwise, that proudly proclaimed that Sega deserved as much love and respect as any of the other top game makers. I had a small amount of success in those early days and gathered about 7,000 subscribers, which I thought wasn't bad for a year's worth of work given the content I covered. But some health issues and a general feeling that my channel wasn't growing like I wanted forced me to close it down at the end of 2017. I honestly didn't feel like anyone would care, and I had more important issues to deal with. Through my Facebook and private messages, I had people asking me what happened and if I was coming back. To my surprise, it seemed some people did care that my channel had been deleted and even wanted me to bring it back. I did just that in April of 2018, and the response couldn't have been more shocking. Within days, the new channel had thousands of new subs and the new content got more views than I had ever gotten before. Now 3 years later, I am breaking 100,000 subscribers on a channel dedicated almost entirely to Sega. Can you believe that? In this episode, I have 3 sections for you to enjoy. The first is a small room tour and behind the scenes of how I make Sega Lord X. The second is a Q&A taken from my YouTube and Facebook followers, and the final section is a thank you for all the success the channel has received. I hope you guys enjoy my 100,000 subscriber special. Alright guys, fair warning, I'm using the little handheld here, so the sound quality may not be great. This is the game room, right here. This is where you come in at. I have some stuff behind the door there, Super Scope, some Nintendo Labo stuff that me and my daughter used to do. Posters, I'm a big fan of George Romero. You'll see some posters of his and a few other horror movies that I'm a fan of. You'll notice that along the top of the wall here, I've got some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures that my daughter used to collect when she was younger. She actually brought those to me a few years back and told me that she had outgrown them and that she didn't want them anymore. So in my game room they came. Another George Romero Night of the Living Dead poster. This closet right here is the only closet in my game room, and it's for odds and ends. Go ahead and show that to you. It's got boxes, burned games, tools, modern games, my Switch stuff, hard drives, PC parts. It's just sort of a catch-all for a bunch of the different items that I have left over from when they come into the game room. So let's go ahead and close that. Over here, more Romero stuff. And this is where the game collection begins right here. I've got some little knickknacks and odds and ends there. This is the Evercade shelf, which I actually hope to do a review of this really soon. I've got the handheld unit. I plan on picking up the console that they're working on. And as you see below that, I have some cartridges to it. There's the Neo Geo Mini. There is my Atari Lynx, which, get in there. And there's the Atari Lynx itself. Up here is Mega CD and Mega Drive, Genesis and Genesis Sega CD combo units that I have. Above that is the full-size C64, which I'm hoping to do a Sega and the C64 episode at some point. Below that is the TurboGrafx or PC Engine shelf. As you can see, I've got a Core Graphics 2. I've got one in the box. I've got an interface unit. I've got some burned games. I've got some accessories, and I've got some retail games for it. I really like the PC Engine. It's such a great system. collecting for it can be really expensive. It's kind of like collecting for the Saturn in some ways. Below that is the Xbox shelf, the original Xbox. As you can see, I've got a plain system and a Halo themed Xbox, but I really like the Xbox. It's one of my favorite systems. It always kind of reminded me of a Dreamcast 2. And below that is the Xbox shelf of games, which I have a lot of the Sega released games for it. And like I said, man, it's just, there's a lot of good stuff for the Xbox. And the cool thing is that a lot of these games are really affordable. Right there, next down is my STV Titan arcade board with the super gun that I use and the cabling, and over there is some games for it that I use. Below that, down there, is my MVS Neo Geo consoleized units. There's two of them down there, and there are some games back there. I don't know if you can see them, but they're back there too. Next shelf over is a massive figure of Omega Supreme. Up there, there's some Xbox systems that are still in the box. Below that, there is an Xbox 360, a Halo themed one, and some games. And there is my PlayStation 3 and the games that I own. For these systems, it's probably important for me to tell you that I actually started collecting my games digitally around the time these two systems came out. I stopped collecting a lot of physical games at this point. All I really cared about was the older stuff when it came to physical games. I really don't care about the newer stuff. Mostly the games that I buy today, I just buy the digital versions of them. They take up so much less space, and as you'll see as we go across the game room, really guys, I don't have the space for anything else. I'm at my peak right now, and this is about as much as I want. Sega CD stuff. Some loose games in the corner. There are some retail Sega CD games, and those are my Mega CD from Japan games back there in that corner. Then you've got my 32X shelf. I have a Japanese Super 32X. I've got some games in some replacement cases and some games in the original cases. And below that is the Neo Geo CD with the controllers and hookups down there. I don't have a lot of games for it, but you know, it plays burned games, so I never really collected much for it. Up here is the start of my Sega Genesis collection. You will see a Japanese Mega CD, Japanese Mega Drive, Japanese Mega Drive 2, and up here, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Hyperstone Heist, Contra Hard Corps, Street Fighter 3, Vampire Killer, Castlevania Bloodlines, and Castlevania The New Generation. I got those guys in protective cases because, well, they tend to be worth more money. Down here, I've got a Sega CD Model 1 with a Genesis Model 1 right there, and some Mega Drive games, which, if you go, you can see I've got stuff like Golden Axe 3, Thunder Force 4, Moonwalker, and some more titles over here. And some more titles back there that you really can't see all that great. Alright, and then we go down to the US games, which I've got a good selection of. I tended to go after the stuff that really meant something to me, games that I really enjoyed. This collection used to be a lot bigger. If you've watched my last room tour, you'll hear me say multiple times that I shrunk my collection back in 2008, and one of the collections that got hit the most was the Genesis. I had nearly a complete US set, and I just got rid of so many of those because, I mean, honestly guys, I just didn't really care about them. You know, they were just kind of mediocre, crappy games. I got rid of all that stuff. And we go down some more and more Sega Genesis games. Right there in the corner, I've got a upgraded Nomad with a new LCD screen. There's a Sega Genesis Mini right there, a few controllers, and like I said, a whole bunch more games. Some of my favorites down there you can see, you know, Shinobi 3 is down there, Midnight Resistance is back there, you know, I love the Genesis, dude. You gotta have one. Oh, let's see. There is my Sega Mark III. There is my Game Gear, yellow Game Gear back there, some Master System games, some loose Master System games, a Master System itself back there. Down there below that is a Sega Saturn, or a custom Sega Saturn arcade controller. I actually modified that myself to work on the Saturn. And back over here, you'll get a Sega Genesis with Altered Beast. There's a Sega Genesis back there that came with Sonic. There's an Astro City Mini up there. You know, a couple of different accessories, odds and ends, you know, crap that you pick up for a game room. And then starts my Sega Saturn collection. The Sega Saturn collection that I have is my largest per game, or is my largest collection in terms of games. I have a lot of the big hitters for the Saturn. Get close in here for you. Over on this side you have some of the games that were never released in the United States. I've got some of those guys, and I've got, like I said, a lot of the big hitters. I actually just had someone sell me for a really good price a Magic Knight Ray Earth, which I was really grateful for because this game is really expensive now. Shining the Holy Ark, Shining Force 3, Shining Wisdom, Albert Odyssey. I do have Panzer Dragoon Saga, but my Panzer Dragoon Saga is actually disc only, and I have it in a custom case, and I prefer the Japanese art. So having it in a custom case is just fine by me. I think this looks so much better than the US box art. And the guy that did it for me just did a killer job on it. I mean, it looks as good or better than any of the retail covers that I've seen. Let's see, I've got some more games. Of course, Virtua Fighter 2 and Sega Rally back there. And below that, I've got some more games, which of course, you know, you have to have Guardian Heroes and Dragon Force and Duke Nukem 3D. And below the US Saturn games is my Dreamcast shelf. The Dreamcast shelf is overloaded. I've got an M-Box Japanese system back there, an M-Box gun, some of the better games, accessories, 2 loose systems, and back here behind all of that is my stack of Japanese games, and back there is my stack of US games kind of piled up back there. I really would like to spread out my Japanese shelf and the US shelf for the Dreamcast so that it's actually on 2 shelves. I just haven't done it yet. I haven't been in this house very long, and so the game room isn't quite exactly how I want it, but it's just, you know, when you get stuff settled in and you get it to where it's on the shelf, you know, you really don't feel like tearing anything down to redo it. Below that is the Xbox One shelf with a pile of accessories and odds and ends down there. Down there on that bottom shelf, you'll see the Mad Catz analog steering wheel that has the pedals and the shifter and all, which is actually one of the Saturn's better wheels. If you can find a game to support it, it works really good. Down there in that corner is an oldie. That is the Atari 2600 with games that belonged to my father and what I used to play when I was younger. Over here we have more Saturn stuff back in the corner. You've got Saturn systems, Saturn Virtua Gun, Twin Stick, V Saturns, there's two systems back there, actually one behind another. You really can't see it all that well. The next shelf down, you've got V Saturns again, both models. You've got more accessories, controllers, a Nights into Dreams 3D analog controller, Bomberman controller, a Mode, other controllers, more 3D analog controllers, more arcade sticks of varying types. You've got some doubles games, more Virtua guns, more arcade sticks. You've got the Cyberbot Special Edition down there. There's a Sakura Wars Special Edition back there somewhere. More accessories back there. Down there you've got the Mission Stick, more arcade sticks, more controllers, more arcade sticks down at the bottom. The Saturn wheel. I mean, I've got a lot of Saturn stuff, man. As we turn to the next wall, up top there, you've got a High Saturn or a Hitachi Saturn. You've got Lego Voltron. I was a big fan of Voltron as a kid. Below that, we've got some more Turtles and Saturn accessories. We've got a Japanese Sega Saturn launch system back there in that gold box. There's the Sega Saturn model kit back there behind the turtle figures. A couple of odds and ends. And this shelf right here, let me pan out a little bit, is my Japanese game shelf. And there are 300, maybe 350 games on this shelf of nothing but Japanese games. And this, again, is my largest collection of games. I've got just about every big hitter you could want for the Saturn. There are a handful that I do not have. The ones that I really concentrated on was the stuff from SNK, which is down there. The stuff from Capcom, which is right there. And the stuff from Sega, which is in the upper shelves up here. My shooter shelf, I've got a bunch of the great shooters for the Saturn down there. And the lighting is kind of crappy over here. I'm sorry about that. But, yeah, man, I've been collecting for the Saturn for 20 plus years now. And that's gotten me some great prices on a lot of these games that are really expensive now. Alright guys, up here you can see my Lego Nintendo Entertainment System. A Nintendo Switch and controller up there. The plushes that you see up there is stuff that I've won with my daughter at various places. I also have a Rec Room Masters arcade machine with a X-Arcade tank stick with trackball. You can see Shinobi, the arcade game there on the screen. Over here, up there are some of my Nintendo consoles. You can see a Japanese Famicom, a Super Famicom. You can see original Game Boy. You can see my Nintendo control deck. You can see my AV Famicom top loader with Famicom games. Next down, you can see NES games that I have, which are mainly games that mean something to me, man. I mean, I was a fan of the NES, so I had to have some of the stuff I loved as a kid. Over here is a Super Famicom that I've restored. That's why it's like super white. There's a bunch of Japanese and US Famicom, Super Famicom games over here. I've got a lot of the big hitters for the Super Famicom. Turtles, all of the Capcom stuff. I don't really collect for the Nintendo systems that way. I just go after the stuff that really meant something to me. You can see Super Castlevania 4 back there in its box, and you can see the Japanese variant sitting in the system. Games like that are what really meant something to me. Down here you can see a loose NES with some more Nintendo games. Of course, I had to have the Castlevania stuff. There in the middle you'll see a GameCube, a mini Super Nintendo, some GameCube games. Over here you'll see a modded Super Famicom. It's, you know, got the tabs ripped out so it'll play Japanese games too. There's some accessories and extra games and stuff back there. Down there is my Wii shelf. I actually liked the Nintendo Wii. I hated that it wasn't an HD system, but it actually got some good Sega games on it, man. It's the only system that ever got Gunblade New York, and it was actually fun to play with the Wiimote. So I've got that and a bunch of games, bunch of Sega games. You can see that Night sequel over there, which I'll get to reviewing that and letting you know how I feel about it eventually. Down below that is my Nintendo DS, 3DS game collection, which, as you can see, there's 2 or 3 systems there. There's a GBA. And beside that is my Japanese Nintendo 64 with a bunch of Nintendo 64 games sitting underneath of it. Then there's my Wii U games, and some accessories that are over there with some amiibos. And if you go back up to where I was, you'll see I have sort of amiibos sitting all over the place on this shelf. Over here is my PlayStation 4 and 5 shelf. That's where the boxes and some of the accessories are. You can see Voltron hanging out up there. Again, big Voltron fan when I was a kid. Below is my PlayStation 1 shelf. I've got the system with the screen. I've got an original system back there behind everything. Over here are my Japanese games. I've got a lot of great Japanese PlayStation 1 games. A lot of it's 2D stuff. And over here I've got some US games. And you can sort of see more down there. And I've got some reproductions. Resident Evil 1.5, English translation of Police Knots. And of course I have Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which of course you had to have because that game is awesome. Alrighty, PlayStation 2 shelf. I've got a lot of PlayStation 2 games. A lot of them are imports, as you can see over here. A lot of them are Sega based. And you know, oh yeah, and I've got some PSP stuff. All of my PSP stuff was digital. I wanted it to be really portable, so I didn't really go after a collection of stuff. I've got some PSP games back up in there, as you can see, but I didn't go after any kind of real collection. There's some PlayStation 2 systems. Those 2 guys over there are Japanese. These 2 original guys over here are US. Right there is, of course, the awesome PlayStation Vita. Some anniversary Street Fighter controllers. Below that are 3DO systems, an FZ1, FZ10. The top one right there actually has a USB mod on it. That's the reason why the disk drive looks like that. And as we back up over here, this, folks, is where I make Sega Lord X. Above, you can see some more posters. Return of the Living Dead over there. Great, great, great movie. I use a 2-monitor setup. As we get closer here, you can see the systems that I use and how they're hooked up. Let me move my phone out the way. So over here, you're starting with a Nintendo Switch, a Dreamcast, a PlayStation. Right here is my HDMI switch and my Framemeister. There is the Elgato Game Capture. There is the Sega Saturn. Back there in that corner, you can see the Nintendo and Super Nintendo Classic. You can see the Mega SG with a Mega SD in it. There's the Xbox. Here is my core graphics. And I've got a laptop and idea book that I keep handy. But this is basically where everything happens, guys. I use a HyperX microphone to record my episodes. Right there. And that's where it all happens. And then as we move back over, we are back at the door. Right here move the chair, is where I keep my accessories. Controllers out the wazoo, man. If you have a game room, you know you collect cables and controllers. I mean, I'll never ever run out of cables and controllers for the systems that I have. And back to the door. And that's it, guys. That is the Sega Lord X room tour. That's where I make the videos that you see. Yeah, it's actually a lot smaller than the room tour that I did in 2018, but you know, space is what it is, man. When you get older, your family starts to really take precedent over where you put your toys. And you know, this is unfortunately the room that I'm left with, so I have to deal with it. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and my next part will be the Q&A. So if you want to stick around for that, that should be up in just a sec. Alright guys, here goes our Q&A section. I pulled all of these from my Facebook page. The post is there now if you just want to go see where I'm getting these questions from. I'm going to try to hit these rapid fire, going to try to be concise so I can move through and answer as many of them as I can. Hopefully it lets you know a little bit more about me, my opinions, my preferences, stuff like that. So I've never really done this before. Hopefully I don't suck at it too much. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, our first question is from Andrew, and he wants to know what are some Japanese exclusives on Saturn that I think would have sold well in the West. Given Sega's market in the West, selling well, you kind of have to stretch what that means. Would it have sold well enough to bring Sega a profit? I think there's a lot of games that could have done that. Even if Sega had only released limited quantities, say 10, 20,000 copies of certain games, I think a lot of games could have sold well. Grandia is a big one. I mean, that game had so much hype behind it. I am still shocked to this day that Sega never brought that to the West. I mean, hell, they could have worked with someone like Working Designs had they not been pissed off, and Working Designs probably would have done the work for that. But even given the translating problems there, a lot of the fighting games could have been brought over. And I think if Sega had, again, released them in limited quantities, you know, 10, 20, 30,000 units, I think the RAM cartridge games would have been really priced at a point that Sega could have made a little bit of money off of it, waiting for the Dreamcast to come out. Because if you remember, once Sega released that last batch of Saturn games in 1998, nothing else came out in the United States, man, for a very long time before the Dreamcast came out. And that was really bad, man, you know, because I'm a firm believer in that out of sight, out of mind thing when it comes to business. Sega sat on the sidelines, man, for like a year and a half with no new product to show anybody. That was a terrible move, man. Whoever at Sega greenlighted that idea ought to be smacked upside the damn head, because that is not how you want to run, you know, a business in, you know, a climate where you're already on the downslide, because nobody's thinking about you for a long time. So when you do come back, they're just sort of like, Sega who? You know, but like I said, role-playing game like Grandia, big hit it could have been, I feel. And a lot of the fighting games, man, particularly the stuff by Capcom and SNK. I think that stuff would have sold well enough to at the very least turn a profit for Sega and keep them in the conversation. You know, that was the most important part, was to keep Sega in the conversation, so that when Dreamcast came out, you know, people weren't just like, where has Sega been for the last 2 years? Outside of that, translation problems are a big issue. You really have to take into account the money that it costs to translate games. I'm pretty sure that's not so cheap, particularly back in those days. Localization is a big factor as to why a lot of Saturn games were never brought out in the US to begin with. So yeah, I would say the fighting games are definitely the ones Sega should have doubled down on. I mean, the Saturn did them well, and they were still popular. Alright guys, on to our next question is from Joseph. He wants to know, what was your most rented game from your local video rental store? That one is easy. It was Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo. I know, big surprise, Sega Lord X and all, but I was a huge fan of Super Metroid. And when it very first came out, I didn't have the money to buy that sucker, man. And by the time that game came out, I had a baby girl. I had a daughter already at that point, and my money was sort of being sucked away, you know, into more important things. But it left me in a situation where at that stretch of time, when it came out, man, Blockbuster, I was there, like renewing my rental like every few days, man, you know, keeping it up until I beat it. And then after I beat it, I loved it so much, I kept renting it, you know, for another week or two so that I could beat it again. You know, that's how much I loved it. And the funny thing is, man, is that by the time you add up those weeks and weeks of rentals, which it had to have been a good 3 weeks of rentals right there, I mean, you know, I probably could have bought the damn game anyway. But you know, man, you want that immediate satisfaction. I wanted to play that game. I was a big fan of Metroid on the NES, so, you know. But yeah, man, Super Metroid is definitely the game I rented the most back in those days. Alright guys, next one is from Andy, and he wants to know, what was the last game you beat? The last game that I beat was the Mass Effect trilogy. I beat them in a row. First, second, and third one. I'm a big fan of Mass Effect. I love that mix of role-playing elements mixed in with an action game. I really think BioWare should have really doubled down on those single-player experiences and made the multiplayer that they would come up with later on and stuff like Anthem as just part of those single-player games, so that there was always that satisfaction hitting the market where if, say, you didn't want to mess with that multiplayer, you still had that great single-player experience. And if you were a multiplayer guy and you didn't want to mess around with the single player, they were sort of, you know, satisfying both sides of the market there. It's been way too long since the last Mass Effect, in my opinion. I didn't really like the direction of Andromeda. I thought that Andromeda, the meat of the game, was a decent game, but I didn't care for the story. I didn't care for the characters. It just felt, even though it used, you know, similar, you know, races and story and whatnot, it felt so just disjointed from the previous Mass Effect experience, you know. I really wanted to know what happened after the Reapers were defeated, you know. I wanted to see the galaxy, you know, basically build itself back up. What were the problems they were having, you know? All of that stuff would have made for a great fourth game. Why did they push it so far away? Why did they make it so alien again and introduce these new bad guys that had really no interesting aspects about them at all? I mean, I don't know, man. Just Mass Effect is a great game. I really loved it. Andromeda, not so much, and we really need a new Mass Effect that sort of goes back to those original games and, you know, stays in those stories and tells us what happened after all those events in the original Mass Effect. Alright, our next question is from Justin, and he wants to know what my favorite unpopular Sega CD game is. Unpopular. Man, there's a lot of unpopular Sega CD games out there. My favorite one is probably Sengoku, the port of the Neo Geo game. A lot of people don't really like that game. They thought it was really stripped down and bare. I don't know, man. I kind of had fun with it. I like the fact that it was a Neo Geo game on the Sega CD that, you know, we really didn't see anywhere else, you know, at that level. I mean, the one that came out on the Super Nintendo was god-awful. At least the Sega CD version looked like the Neo Geo version most of the time. Outside of that, probably if I had to put my finger on a popular, unpopular game, I'd probably say Mortal Kombat. There's a lot of people that hate Mortal Kombat on the Sega CD. I liked Mortal Kombat on the Sega CD. I mean, I liked what they did. I liked the fact that the music was good. I liked the fact that they added extra details, that they improved the life bar. I mean, there's some parts of Mortal Kombat on the Sega CD that sucked, but I mean, what you gonna do, man? It was a CD system back in 1992, dude. I mean, it's gonna have problems, you know? But yeah, Sengoku and Mortal Kombat would be the two games I'd say were unpopular, semi-unpopular, that I really enjoyed. Alright guys, next question is from Jed, and he wants to know, what dormant Sega franchises would you like to see get revived? Well, number one right off the bat is Dragon Force. I mean, I'm still in shock and disbelief that Sega has not done anything with the Dragon Force IP. That game is still so unique, man. I mean, there are so few games even remotely like it. Sega could build an entire world around that, man. I mean, imagine a 3D engine where they take the 100 versus 100 sprites of the Saturn and they turn that into a 10,000 versus 10,000 polygon battle. You know, I don't know, man. Just, there's so much there Sega could do with. I'm just really blown away that Sega hasn't done more. I would also really like for Sega to bring back the Panzer franchise. Honestly, I wouldn't care if it was a role-playing game or not. Just a new Panzer Dragoon game in that universe with that gameplay. I mean, do something big with it, something epic. You know, let somebody, if Sega doesn't want to do it, give it to somebody else and let them make an entirely new game, you know, with it. And I don't mean something that's like a remake that's already being done. I mean, that stuff is okay, but I'm talking about something new, man, something modern, something epic, something that feels the part of a modern game. You know, I mean, Sega really does have a lot of IPs that they're just not touching much of. I mean, I can understand some of it because they've tried in the past and really the new versions of the games had failed, but a lot of times, man, those new versions kind of sucked. You know, when they tried to do that with Altered Beast and Golden Axe, man, the games that they made to continue the franchise, they really weren't that good, man. It's like, dude, if Sega can't make it happen, turn it over to somebody that can. License it out. You know, let other people work with it. I'm sure there are plenty of developers out there that would love to have Sega come knocking on their door and say, hey man, make us a brand new game, make us a brand new Comic Zone, you know? I mean, there are developers out there that would take it and run with an opportunity like that. Sega is sitting on a ton of money when you really think about it, because they have so much they could give. I mean, I bet you there are dozens of developers out there that would just love to get a hold of the Shinobi franchise and make like a, you know, Shinobi-vania or Shinobi RPG or anything like that, man, to just bring that franchise into the future and really give it another shot with new players, man, because there's so much they could pull from the old and mix it with the new to really make it something special. And I'm rambling again, I'm sorry guys, but yeah, I mean, Sega has a ton of properties, but my two favorite would probably be Panzer Dragoon and Dragon Force. Alright guys, next question is from Nick. What are your favorite non-Sega games? Specifically, any favorite Nintendo game? I'm not your typical Sega fan in that regard. I do not hate Nintendo. As a matter of fact, I really love a lot of Nintendo's games. I'm a big fan of Mario, loved F-Zero, loved Metroid, really liked a lot of the Zelda games. One series that really surprises everyone is the Pilot Wings series. I love those games, man. I mean, those games were so fun. Those were the kind of games that were almost therapeutic in the way they were made, dude. You could jump into your vehicle and just fly around the area taking pictures and just waste hours doing that. And there were always mini games and side games and stuff to do and find and mess around with. Those games were great, man. If you've never played a Pilot Wings game, you really should find one and play it. Those games you can just dump so much time in, and it's the kind of time that's just relaxing. It's, you know, no-brainer. It's just, hey, I'm having fun. And those were sometimes the best games. All right, our next one is from Pedro. Pedro says, would you want Sega back in the console business? A Dreamcast 2. Honestly, no. In this day and age, the way the competition is so fierce between companies that are just so much bigger than Sega, I think it would be suicide for Sega to try to get back in the console market. A Dreamcast 2 or whatever the console would be called, it would face such incredible competition. I mean, at first fans would probably be excited for it, but once they realized that it's not, this system isn't gonna get the multitude of games that Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo are soaking up, is there room for a fourth contender in the market? Maybe on a much smaller scale. I think Sega might be able to get away with a system that was online, where they didn't have to worry about selling physical cartridges, where they could sell like their old arcade games and their old console games, and then make new versions of those games that would get older fans excited and maybe draw in some new younger fans who would want to play those kinds of games, Sega might be able to get away with that, but as far as an actual high-end, high-tech contender to Sony and Microsoft, no way, man. I mean, Sega would get the floor wiped with them if they tried that at this point. It's too expensive to compete in that world right now in 2021. All right, guys, next question is from Jason. What was the biggest thing you didn't anticipate about making a YouTube series? That's an easy one, man. Time investment. Whoa. When I first started doing this, guys, it was sort of like I came in completely ignorant. I came in and I was like, hey, everybody's making video game, shows. I want to make one. I want to get my opinion out there. I want to pimp Sega. All these freaking Nintendo guys are making all this content. Where are the Sega opinions at? And when I jumped in, I had zero clue the time investment to make these videos. It boggled my mind, man. It's like the first video I ever made took me like 15 hours just to edit it and get it to where I thought it was watchable. And I had no clue that was going to be the case, man. I thought you just flicked the camera on and ran your mouth to the camera, and I found that wasn't good enough. Like, I wanted to show lots and lots of gameplay. I wanted to switch smoothly scene to scene. I wanted to put these pictures in there, and before I knew it, man, it was really taking a lot of time to make this content, and that really blew me away. I mean, anyone that tells you that making YouTube videos is easy has absolutely no clue what the hell they're talking about. I mean, doing this kind of work, it is time consuming. I mean, you have to sit on your ass editing video for hours and hours at a time. There's gameplay capture. The way I do it, there has to be a script written. It's just, there is a lot of time and effort put into these videos, man. And that was so much harder than I thought it was in the very beginning, I thought it would be so much easier, and boy, was that a rude awakening, dude. If you're interested in getting into YouTube, understand that right now. It really doesn't matter what the equipment that you have. It really doesn't matter what your level of passion is, or what you're interested in, or what your show's going to be about. The question you really need to ask yourself is, do you have the time investment to make it work? Because you're going to spend a lot of time editing. You're going to spend a lot of time recording, capturing video. It is amazing the time sink it is to make just one video on YouTube that has any kind of decent editing in it. I mean, if you're thinking you're just gonna throw these videos out and spit them out with no problem, with any kind of production value, good luck, man. I wasn't able to do it. Alright guys, next question is from Robert. He says, in your opinion, without the mistakes of 32X, the Saturn launch, the Dreamcast security flaw, do you see any way that Sega could still be in the console business today? No. Sega was already heading towards being outclassed by much larger businesses and Nintendo's fight. Sega, in my opinion, even if the Saturn had been successful, even if the Dreamcast had been more successful, they were already headed towards merging with someone else. If it wasn't going to be Bandai, it would eventually have been probably Microsoft. The reason why I say Microsoft is because Sega was already talking about wanting to be absorbed by Microsoft back in the Dreamcast days, and I think the reason why Microsoft didn't go after them more aggressively was because the Saturn and the Dreamcast did not sell well. So they were sort of standoffish, like, these guys, these cats aren't as hot as they used to be. But had the Saturn done better, had the Dreamcast done better, the Xbox 360 may have been a jointly developed console between Microsoft and Sega, if not outright Microsoft buying Sega. Which, as you know, man, that would have really changed everything. I mean, that would have greatly changed the landscape of gaming across the board. Microsoft in control of all of those IPs and bringing a bunch of them back into modern games really may have been interesting. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really sure how that would have went, but, it would have been a lot different than what we have today, because a lot of, most of that Sega stuff back then, the Yakuza series, everything that Sega had in its back catalog would have been Microsoft exclusive. It's definitely an interesting question, but Sega, in my opinion, was definitely heading towards a merger with someone at some point, whether those systems had sold well or not. Alright, the next question is from John. He wants to know, what is it about Sega that made you fall in love with them? That's an easy one, man. It was their arcade games. Sega made arcade games like nobody else could, dude. I mean, you go back in the mid-80s and you look at the stuff they started putting out, from the sprite scalers on up, their beat-em-ups, their action games. I mean, just nothing felt like a Sega game, dude. I mean, you went into an arcade and you saw Thunderblade for the first time. It was in that little mini chopper. You saw Afterburner, man. Afterburner was in a set-down unit, that had a flight stick and it moved, I mean, that stuff was cool as hell. And plus, nothing looked like Sega games, dude. I mean, you go back to 85, 86, and you're looking at stuff like Space Harrier, you're looking at stuff like Outrun, you're looking at Super Hang-On. I mean, dude, what else looked like Sega games back then? And those games made me fall in love with Sega, man, because that's what I wanted to play. It was like, that was a wow factor that nothing at home would have for another decade, man. And that's wild when you think about it, that Sega's games in the mid-80s would take a decade to come home anywhere close to what they were in the arcade. And even then, half the time, the frame rates were cut in half. It took a very long time for Sega's technology to be accurately, portrayed at home. You could even argue that it wasn't until the Saturn and Dreamcast where a lot of these games finally came home intact. So yeah, man, they're arcade games, first the sprite scalers, the beat 'em ups, Golden Axe, Shinobi, then we get into the polygon stuff, the Model 2, the Model 3. Sega was just always special, dude. It was their games looked a world apart from everything else, and I always loved that about them. Alright, moving on. This one is from Meta, and they ask, how did you buy games by importing them during your youth when the internet wasn't available to the public yet? All importing back in those days, for me, revolved around phone orders, man. How this worked is there were import game companies in the larger cities. They were in New York, they were in Chicago, they were in LA, they were in San Francisco, they were in Seattle. And what would happen is these places would advertise in magazines, computer magazines, gaming magazines. They would advertise all over the place. And what would happen is you would see their number and their prices and their listings, and you'd call them up and you would tell them what you wanted. And in my case, I didn't have a credit card back in those days, so you'd have to do it collect on delivery, or cash on delivery as it's sometimes called. And what would happen is you would order it, they would send it to you by UPS, and the UPS guy would get there, and you would have to pay him exact change in a money order or cash, and then you would get your item. And it was kind of a crappy way to do it. A couple of times I got the wrong thing, which really sucked because you had to refuse it, and most of the time if you refused to pay for it, the UPS guy would send it back, and the import company would be mad as hell at you, man. They wouldn't collect on delivery anything else to you if you did that, even if it was their mistake, man. But yeah, collect on delivery, UPS guy, exact change. It was like that for years, man. From the very first time I did it, which was in right around 1990, all the way up until the internet really became a full-on thing and places like eBay started popping up. So it was a nice stretch of time there where you had to call and you had to order your stuff like that. And you know, you kind of made certain acquaintances on the telephone. You know, you talk to certain people and it would be like, hey man, you know, what's coming out, what's about to come out, how much is that gonna be? And it was all over the phone. Your phone was the internet. You know, that's how you kept in touch. That's how you found out what was coming out. That's how you found out how much stuff cost. And you know, I kind of remember it kind of fondly, but it did really suck, man, because you'd have to be there when the UPS guy came. You had to have that exact change. If you were off by a penny, dude would not take it, man. You know, it's like, you're not getting your stuff. I'll come back by tomorrow. But yeah, man, it was like that, man. Telephone, collect on delivery, UPS guy. That would like that for years. Okay, next question is from Josh. What's your skill level playing games? What's considered a hard, challenging game for you? I would imagine my skill level is what a lot of people's skill level is. It really depends on the game. If it's a game I really like, a game I'm interested in, a game I put a lot of time into, I can get as good at it as just about anybody else can get good at it. You know, there are Sega Genesis games that a lot of people consider to be really difficult. Something like Revenge of Shinobi. Man, I've played Revenge of Shinobi so much and I loved it so much that I can beat it front to back without hardly losing a life now, man. I mean, I just crushed the game. And it's like that for a lot of Genesis games because I played them so much. There are games out there that I consider difficult just because of the way it's set up. A lot of people laugh at me when I call Sonic, the first Sonic game, hard for the Genesis, but you know, I considered that game really difficult, man, because the game itself is not hard to beat. That's what I want to stress. It's collecting those damn Chaos Emeralds that made that game difficult for me. I was sort of like a completionist back then, man. I wanted to beat the game total. You know, I didn't want to beat the game without the Chaos Emeralds. That wasn't beating the game to me. I wanted to beat the game the way it wanted me to beat it. And that included collecting all those Chaos Emeralds. And it was a real pain, man, because if you missed a couple opportunities to get those gems, you know, getting the bonus stages in the late game were actually really difficult. But there are just other games on the, you know, that I found to be really difficult because the gameplay was hard. Something like Budokan was really hard to play. What's it called? Oh crap, I don't forget. The Immortal. The Immortal is a hard game because everything kills you with one damn hit. You know, so you could be going along thinking you're doing all great and dead, and then you come back and dead, and you come back and then it's dead. You spent half your time in that game dead, so a frustration level would build up, making that game difficult. But like I said, man, if I like the game and I spent time in it, I could get good at just about anything I wanted to. These days, I don't have the time to put into games that I used to. A lot of times when a new fighting game comes out, a new Soul Calibur, a new Tekken, I would say, honestly, my skill level is probably well below average because I just don't have the time to sink into those games to learn them front to back the way I used to. I mean, back in the day, man, you know, when Street Fighter 2, Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo and the Alpha games came out, I played those games so much, man. I was formidable to just about anyone. Nobody was dogging me out with any character at all. But nowadays, I would say you could take somebody that was an average player and they'd probably wipe the floor with me just because I don't have the time investment that I used to. And in a lot of these games nowadays, that makes a hell of a difference. All right, our next question is from Kane, who looks like he kind of cheated and put bunches of questions in there. So his first question is, what's a game that you played often with your family? Family being, I would play with my sisters. They loved the co-op stuff, Streets of Rage, Turtles, games like that, man. They really got off on working with me to beat a game. They love that kind of stuff. When it came to playing with my father when I was younger, my father was a score guy. He was like all about getting the score. I think a lot of the older gamers, were. So it's Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Galaga, Demon Attack, stuff like that, man. He was all about getting that score. So after he would finish, he'd write his score down, and then I would play, and that was our playing together, you see. We didn't actually play together, but it was him trying to beat my score, me trying to beat his score. And, that's the way it was for a lot of those games between me and my father. Alright, the next part of his question is did your love of gaming inspire you to get into the field of electronics? Absolutely. I am a component level electronics repair technician by trade. And it was wanting to work on my video game systems and the accessories that got me into that. That's what put me into that field. Right out of high school, man, that's what I was training to do. It allowed me to learn to mod my systems, to repair systems that were dead, to find out why they were dead. Among my friends after that, it sort of I became the go-to guy. Like, hey man, look at this, this is broke, or there's no video, there's no sound, or this controller doesn't work. Can you tell me what's going on? And that was always cool, man, because I always liked opening up and tinkering with all of this stuff to see what was in it, how it worked, to find out what the chips did, to find out what could be replaced. When I first learned that a Sega Genesis video chip had the S-video signal there, it blew my mind because it made me realize, hey, I can mod a Sega Genesis to output S-video, and all I have to do is do a couple of, small modifications to make that happen. And learning how to make that happen, it was all video games that made me want to do that. All right, next part of his question is why do you like Jackie so much? I can't stand him. Jackie is awesome in the Virtua Fighter series, man. His moves are really flashy, but there's also a lot of moves with him that are really, they're takedown, insta, damage moves. He's got that nasty flash kick that does tons of damage that you can just pull out of your ass anytime. I love his simple combos. The elbow knee combos are so effective against the computer. His low combos are also really effective against people one-on-one fighting. Coming in, attacking high, and then doing his low sweeps. A lot of those moves, man, most people fall for them almost 100%. So, I learned to be really good with Jackie in the first Virtua Fighter. I was great with him again in Virtua Fighter 2, and I just kept using him from there, man. I just love the way his fighting was counterintuitive to a way a person normally blocks. When you start attacking somebody up high, they're just naturally holding the block button up high, and then all of a sudden, man, you go immediately to low. And Jackie had a lot of flow with his combos that would do that. So that's the reason why I played and stuck with him. And finally, Kane's last part to his question is what are your favorite 80s horror movies? Dude, I am all about George Romero and the genre that he spawned. Anything zombie in the 70s and 80s, I'm all about, man. Return of the Living Dead, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, You know, all of those movies I absolutely adore. You know, I watched them when I was little. Probably shouldn't have watched them when I was little, but I still loved them, man. There was something special about that. I love that isolation aspect to them. I love that we can't escape. What are we gonna do? You know, and then there was always that human drama that just brought it all crashing down. And every single one, man, it wasn't the zombies that would get them. It was that human drama that just caused everything to collapse. You know, if anything, man, it's a cautionary tale. It's pretty much letting everybody know that when you think you have this big problem that's going to get everybody killed, it's usually the squabbling to figure out what to do that actually causes you to fail. So I always appreciated that, even as a younger person. George Romero, man, that dude was awesome. You know, I was really sad to see when he died a while back, but you know, that dude contributed some really great cinema to the world. Alright, our next question is from Craig, and Craig apparently has cheated a little bit as well, and he has added multiple questions into his one question. First part is, most surprising fact about SLX. Probably the most surprising fact about me is that I'm a big Nintendo fan. A lot of people expect me to hate Nintendo because I'm a Sega guy. Nothing could be further from the truth. Like I said earlier, man, Mario, Zelda, Metroid, man, I love those games. I always played them when they came out. I never looked down on them. Never said Nintendo didn't have anything good to play. Even though I preferred the stuff that Sega was doing, man, the stuff Nintendo did was still super fun, man. I never missed any of it. I always wanted to play it. And that always surprises people. It's kind of like, just because I'm a Sega guy, automatically I had to hate on Nintendo. And that was not the case at all. Alright, next part of the question is, number one regret, gaming or not? You know, that's a big question, man. When it comes to gaming, my biggest regret is not keeping the stuff that I had back in the mid to late 90s. Something that a lot of people don't understand is they accuse me of, you know, not telling the truth. Like, you didn't own this stuff back in the early 90s, you were too young. Man, you have to understand that everything was give and take back in those days. You know, it was kind of like when I saved up to buy a Super Graphics, you know, way back when, I only had that Super Graphics for a little while. And then I had to take that Super Graphics and trade it back into the import store. And that was so that I could get something in return, so that I could get something new. There was a give and take like that with everything, man. Super Graphics was mine for a little while. I played some of its games. Super Graphics was then moved somewhere else so that I could get money to buy this next thing that I wanted to get. And whatever that next thing was, I would have it for a little while, and then I would sell it or trade it so that I could get the next thing. And there was an ebb and flow always to everything back then. So you wound up not keeping anything for any real length of time. And that's my biggest regret, man, because I stayed in that mindset even throughout the mid to late 90s when I started making enough money where I really didn't have to do that. You know, I could have kept all of those Saturn games that I got at their retail price, you know. I didn't have to give them up, but I was in that mindset that, hey, I've had this game for a little while, I enjoyed it, let me get rid of it and sell it to a friend or trade it in somewhere or do something with it so I can get money to go get this other thing. And guys, I did not get out of that mindset until about 2000 or so, when I really started to collect. And when I say collect, I mean I actually started keeping this stuff where it was mine and I never let it go again. But yeah, man, that's my biggest regret. I wish I had stopped once I started making enough money to keep that stuff, because my collection would have been so huge just from that stuff, and I wouldn't have had to have rebought it. I wouldn't have had to have spent all that extra money. So yeah, that's a pretty big regret right there. Alright, his next part of the question is what would a young Mel want to hear from an older Sega Lord X? Gaming related, I would say probably what I just went over. You know, keep your stuff, dude. Don't trade it in, don't sell it, don't get rid of it. Life lesson wise, I would probably say keep your pants on, dude. You know, I was just 17 years old when my first daughter was born, and starting child support at that age, man, it was rough, let me tell you. You know, I remember the first time my check got hit with that child support garnishment, man, and I just remember just being like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And it really did force me to grow up really fast, man, because I had to start finding jobs that would actually pay me so that I could survive, man. And, you know, I had to work, you know, losing that money each and every week. And yeah, dude, it's just, you make mistakes sometimes in your life, and sometimes you got to pay for them. So if I could tell my younger self anything, it would be, dude, consider what this is gonna mean. All right, last part of his question is what PCBs would you most like to own? PCBs, I'm assuming that you're talking about arcade PCBs. So what arcade PCBs would I like to own? For a while, I actually had a PCB collection of arcade games. I really liked it there for a while, but then they started taking up too much room. It became kind of fiddly taking care of them. I had one go bad that I could not fix that drove me insane. So I'm not really an arcade PCB guy anymore. If I had to add one to my collection, that I would probably want a Naomi with a full setup to it and probably a few of its best games. I don't know, just outside of that, I don't know. It's just I don't really want to mess with arcade PCBs anymore. It would have to be something like an STB Titan where I can just slap a cartridge in it and be done. I really like the Neo Geos because of that, because, you know, you can consoleize it and just, you know, change the cartridge and you're good to go. And of course, it's always nice to get a flash cartridge for those types of systems, which I actually have one for my Neo Geo. So yeah, man, Naomi, I would definitely want a Naomi. Okay, last question, guys. This one is coming from Simon, and he says, are there any titles or memories from your past you don't already have and would want to get? That one is actually an easy one. My most wanted thing in retro gaming is a Samsung Korean Saturn. I have wanted one of these things forever. I mean, no joke, man. 20 plus years I've wanted one of these things, and I have not found one that I can afford. When they finally did start showing up on eBay, they were already expensive, man. You know, they were hundreds more than the regular Saturn. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, that's too expensive. I'll just keep looking until I find one on my own. Well, of course, as the years went by, as you guys know, that thing got really expensive really fast. So now that when you see one, even one that's not complete in poor condition, you know, those things are usually $1,000 or more, which has left me now in 2021. I don't have a Korean Samsung Saturn in my collection, and at the price that that thing is in box, it looks like I'm never going to get one. So that really sucks, man, you know, because I mean, I love the idea of the different kinds of Saturns anyway. You know, I love that they were different colors. I love that there were different manufacturers, and just one that I've never played, one that I've never touched, one that I've never seen fire up with my own eyes, man. There's a draw to that, especially with the Saturn, because you guys know it's my favorite system. So to know that there's a Saturn out there that I've never seen, never touched, never gotten a chance to use, I mean, there's just this huge draw to that, and that's definitely my most wanted retro device without question. Alright guys, that's the end of the Q&A. We've got one more thank you section coming up. I'm apologizing for the camera that I've got here. It's not the best camera in the world, but I don't put myself on camera a lot, so this is the best I have right now. So I know the audio is kind of janky, but anyway guys, I appreciate you watching the Q&A, and we have one more section coming up to close it, so let's take a look at that. While I don't feel like 100,000 subscribers really means anything in and of itself, I do appreciate the outpouring of support all the same. If it weren't for you watching, I couldn't afford to do something I really enjoy doing. And with that, I bid you all a huge thank you for sharing your own time and experiences with me each and every episode. I also want to thank everyone that has helped me with my content, from the folks responsible for my intro, to the Patreon supporters, to the other content creators that have helped me with various pieces of art and video clips. You all have been an important part of my success. I want to end this video with a special thank you to David Lee, otherwise known as Saturn Dave from the Sega Saturn Shiro group of content creators. From the beginning, this dude was always kind to me, always supporting me, and provided the first real logo I had ever used, letting me know that my channel meant more to people than I ever realized. He was there when I shut it down, and he was there as one of the supporters for me to bring it back. He's a big reason why I had the confidence to return, and I hope his work sees a similar level of success in the future. Where I go from here really depends on you guys. I'll keep bringing you as much Sega content as you want, and as long as you keep watching it, I'll be here to provide it. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for always being here, and I will catch you next time.